It seems to me these days that the people in this country are just triggered by a small act of kindness from a law enforcement agency, or triggered by anything else, I should say. It's really sad that Donald Trump supporters had to be triggered so badly over something like this, something as small as this. Now, I'm about to talk to you about Greg Kelly, a sycophant who works with Newsmax, who was a accused rapist and a former U.S. Marine. No, I'm not even going to talk about that because he lost whatever respect he had as a Marine with me. Anyway, he goes off on this rant about the NYPD taking kids in New York City on a field trip to Washington, D.C. And of course, these kids being African American, they decided, the NYPD captain you're about to see in this clip explains why they went to the African American Museum of History and Culture. Take a look at this, and you're going to get sick to your stomach when you hear Kelly's rationalizations for his racist rant.
City Police Department is a great organization, and I think their heart is in the right place. They sent a bunch of kids on a cool field trip, although it wasn't as cool as it could have been. They all got on an NYPD bus, okay? Donald Trump calls it the paddy wagon. Anyway, NYPD bus, and they went down to Washington, D.C. Here's a police captain, I think, describing what's going on.
A lot of these kids haven't had the opportunity to get down there. Some of them can't afford it. Some of them don't even know that it exists. So for us to be able to do this, it's just, again, it's a great educational opportunity for them. It's a great way for us to partner up with the Board of Ed and give these kids an interactive experience.
All right. Cool. Very cool. But here is the problem. Where do they go in Washington, D.C.? What's the destination? The African American Museum of Culture and History. How much can we learn about Harriet Tubman? I mean, I'm sorry, but there are so many cool museums. And I think, well, I've been to this museum, and I really think at this moment, some of it is, well, creating more division. Yes, more division. A museum can do that. If you focus too much on what separates us, I wish that bus would take a slight detour and go to the Air and Space Museum. I don't care what you look like. That is the coolest museum in the world. All right? You walk in, planes and spaceships everywhere. So much better than any museum there. Any museum. I love it. It's very kid appropriate. Hey, they even have a moon rock you can touch.
Not as cool as it could have been. A lot of these kids may not even have the opportunity in their lives to go to Washington, D.C. And here they are, school kids, 4th, 5th, 6th graders. I don't know how old they are. I don't know all the details. This asshole didn't give us any kind of details on it. But how cool is that? You're a kid going to Washington, D.C. I wish someone had did that for me. Mind you, as a kid, I went to Huntsville, Alabama, the space area. That's how I got into flight. Anyway, and you're angry because they decided to take them to a museum that informs them, that educates them about who they are, about where they came from, about African American history, the history that people like you, that people like the rest of the Republican Party want to destroy or sweep under the rug. See, that's what really gets me about people like this, and so many people out there like this, that they can't take the fact, they can't take the idea that this country wasn't built by George Washington. Yeah, he created the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, but when it comes down to the fine material things, this country was built on the backs of slaves. My ancestors, these kids' ancestors, and now they understand that, and maybe they'll understand more about this country. maybe hopefully that trip may save these kids, a lot of these kids, from becoming drug addicts and a lot of other drug addicts and all that kind of crap, and all the crap you Republicans want to label me and everyone else that looks like me because of my skin tone as being. But then he calls it much cooler museums. Now, full disclosure, 3 years ago, my father, my stepmother, and I, we went to Washington, D.C. while Donald Trump was still in office. Part of me went there because I wanted to get there before he burned the whole place down, just to, whatever reasons, just to get his rocks off, whatever. And I went there. We went there. We spent 4 days there. First full day there, we went to the African American Museum, and it was an eye-opener for me. I learned a lot more from that museum than listening to some white teacher trying to talk about African American history when he doesn't really want to talk about it. And that was probably the most eye-opening experience I've had in my life, and I am so grateful for that. I learned more about the slave trade that built this country. The original sin of slavery that people like you, Kelly, want to just delete, say it didn't happen. Slavery didn't happen in this country. That's what's in your mindset. And if you say it did happen, then what's the point of bringing up that history? Because it's a history of this country. The good, the bad, the ugly, and the bloody, which you want to just delete, but it's not going to happen. And his statement of this museum is creating more division. How? By celebrating the African American experience from slavery all the way to the presidency, from slavery all the way to Barack Obama, and everything else in between. And I do mean everything else, because that museum, I'm just going to say it right now. I believe it's the duty of every American, every real American in this country. And I don't mean real American as in you immigrated here or anything else. I'm not selecting that. Every person who calls himself an American to visit that museum. To visit that museum. Because, you know why? Because you'll learn more, a lot more, about African American history than you probably have learned watching, with all respect to all the African American directors out there who've made historical movies like Selma. You'll learn more about that walking the entire length of that museum. And it is a big museum. You can learn more about that, learn walking through that museum in less than 1 day than you could ever watching a 2-hour and 30-minute movie in the theater. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So him saying creating more division, how is it creating division? Is it telling people to hate whites in this country? No. Is it telling people to hate other races? No. Is it informing people about the history of this country, the real history of this country? Yes, it is. If that's creating more division, then why are we learning all about George Washington? All we learned about Washington when I was in school was he helped create America. That's it. We didn't learn anything else. He was a military journalist, probably the furthest I learned about him in school. I mean, it didn't take until I became an adult, almost 21, 22 years old, to learn that he was a slave owner, that he participated in the slave trade. That is the history that we need to look at. One of the exhibits in that museum was Emmett Till's casket. Now, obviously, I couldn't take pictures of it. They told us not to, so we didn't. That's the history people like Greg Kelly wanted to delete. Like Emmett Till didn't happen. Like Jim Crow, the Jim Crow laws that many Republicans in this country want back didn't happen. Or they want to say it didn't make any difference, or it wasn't as bad as history records. That museum is not creating division. People like Greg Kelly, people like the Republicans, people like Donald Trump, who they serve even after he was pulled out of office, are the ones creating division. And then he goes off about the Air and Space Museum. Now, disclosure on this, I went during that 4 days I was in Washington, D.C., we went to the Air and Space Museum. I wanted to go there. Because again, I'm a person, I have a great respect for air travel, and not to mention when it comes to space travel, the history of it. I mean, you ask me a question about any space shuttle mission, I can tell you about it. The Apollo missions, I can tell you about it. The Mercury 7, all of it. So that's definitely one of the places I definitely wanted to go, and I loved it. Hell, this t-shirt I'm wearing, I got from the Air and Space Museum. In case you don't know, the Tuskegee Airmen were the first African-American fighter pilots in the Second World War. Served with distinguished records and helped win the war for the United States in the air, for the Allies in the air. See, Kelly, you probably don't know that, although you're a United States Marine, a former Marine Corps pilot. And you're telling me you don't know anything like this? And that's the history you want to wipe away? Anyhow, I've been to a few museums when I was in Washington, D.C. I toured the monuments, and it is a beautiful, beautiful city, Washington, D.C. When you take the politics and ignore right versus left, blue versus red, all that crap, it is a beautiful city to want to go to. And I would encourage everyone to go there. These kids got a chance to take a field trip there. How cool is that? And you damn them because they went to an African-American museum? Where exactly would you want them to go? Well, you obviously mentioned the Air and Space Museum, obviously. But where else do you want them to go? This entire thing is nothing more born of racism, plain and simple. There's no evidence that museum ever created division. No evidence whatsoever. But people like you have, Kelly. People like you guys at Newsmax, ONN, Breitbart, all those clowns. The Republicans in this country. Donald Trump himself created that division. And the sick part about it is Donald Trump actually was there when the museum actually opened. I believe he shouldn't have been there. That's holy ground, considering we compare it to Donald Trump. That's holy ground. He shouldn't even be anywhere near that museum because he has no respect for the history of African Americans. He's shown that too many times, and neither do you. I would suggest that you go take a trip to that museum, understand the history of it, but honestly, I think those lessons are going to fall on deaf ears when it comes to you, Kelly. And that's a shame, because you would learn so much about the real history of this country, not the mummified, romanticized version that you want kids to learn. And as for those NYPD officers who brought those kids there, thank you. Now, I'm not saying thank you because you guys did this. I'm saying thank you for being the cops that we are supposed to respect. We're supposed to understand. Not the cops that obviously idiots like Kelly want. Shoot on sight. Blackface, he's a threat. And as for you, Kelly, I'm going to close this video on this, and I hope to God this cuts deep into you. You're a disgrace. You're a disgrace to this country, to yourself as a man and as an American, and you are definitely a disgrace to those who wear the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor of the United States Marine Corps. I would say you should be ashamed, but in the last 6 years, people like you have shown me that you have no shame. I don't know what happened to you. Maybe Donald Trump gave you the excuse to be racist. Maybe that's the case. But there's going to be people like me, not just because I'm black, because there are whites, Muslims, Mexicans, Latinos, excuse me, though Americans of all shapes, sizes, and colors that are going to fight against racism like yours. And I'm going to have fun doing it, watching you try to explain away your racism while you fall flat on your damn face. CTP, know the truth. God bless. Peace to the left, justice to the right.